This is Aaron Levine with another episode of the And Insurance podcast, where we connect with professionals to help you as a business owner or as a homeowner or as an individual, as a part of a family unit to learn and understand about what's going on behind the scenes. And then obviously we tie it back to insurance. Today we have Julia Dasaro with us from Desaro Law. And Julia practices in the space of real estate law and family law. So Julia, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate you being here.
You're welcome, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about your practice, and then I want to dive into a little bit more into family law.
Sure. So I am the owner of the Desaro Law firm. I'm the attorney there as well. I have had my own practice for approximately 15 years. I believe this October will be 15 years. Prior to that, I practiced at one or two different local firms after I had clerkship in Monmouth County, and prior to that, graduating from law school. Like you said, I primarily focus on family law and real estate. Briefly, we know what's going on in the real estate market. So right now there is a lot of real estate. But for the most part, my focus has always been family law. Since I've had my firm, I actually did some other types of law prior to that. But since I opened up on my own, I have moved into the family law field.
So touching on the real estate business really quick, right? We're in August 2021 and things have been on fire here in Monmouth County. Have you seen a plateau yet, or are things still?
I've seen small plateaus over the course of the last year. You know, this really started, I would say, in or around May to June of last year. We had the exodus of the city dwellers who decided that, being cooped up in a studio apartment isn't so great when there's no place else to go. It's fabulous when you can go all over the place in the city, but when you're just there with no place to go, with everything being closed, they wanted some more space. So we saw things like people making offers on townhomes and condos without coming to see them. Because they wanted to make an offer when it went on the market midweek and they couldn't get there till the weekend. So that leveled out to an extent. But, what came along with it were, the people looking to downsize, and then, things becoming available for, first-time home buyers, or maybe people who have been in their first home but want to move up to a little bit of a larger home, starting families. And really, it's kind of picked back up. I don't know if it's to the exact same pace of last year, but it's definitely still busy. And the biggest issue, and I'm sure the realtors would tell you this as well, is supply.
Right.
We have so many people that come in, they say, we sold our starter house, we're looking to upgrade. We sold it to this nice young couple. They're going to buy it as their first home, but we can't get out until we have a place to go. I say, okay, well, what's going to happen when the people who want to move in, Right. So, and we get that on both ends. We put a bid on our house, but the sellers can't leave. Okay, well, don't come to me when you say I need to get my kid enrolled in school or whatever. So, we really try to manage the expectations of the clients and say, we need to put some parameters on this. I know you want to give away your firstborn in order to, be the accepted offer, but that's not such a great idea. And that's basically what's been going on.
And Murphy's limited eviction, so you can't get them out.
Yep. That's a whole other issue.
So are the courts back open yet? Are things opening back up in the court system?
Things are opening back up. The first thing that opened back up were criminal trials. Okay. And then they started to do some civil jury trials. I'm not sure how many of those they've done or are doing. I believe they're somewhat hybrid. So the judge and the attorneys may be in one room, but the jury's in another. And then I just was scheduled for my first in-court appearance in the middle of September on a domestic violence trial.
Okay.
I believe it's around the 14th, but I think September 1 is the date on that, where they are in the family courts anyway, bringing the domestic violence trials back in person.
Okay.
Anything else? I have not heard anything, the things that usually go just along with our divorce cases, case management conference, settlement conferences, mediation, which I do a lot of. We've been doing that all virtually, although I have done some mediation in person. As the mediator and also as a participant, because I think that there's something to be said for that. So,
okay. So now in your practice on the family law side of things with respect to divorce, domestic violence, guardianship, are things busier than ever because of COVID at this time?
At this time, yes, I would say things are, well, I don't know about busier than ever, but things are certainly busy. We certainly had a slowdown during the beginning of COVID where everybody didn't know what was happening, and just kind of sat stagnant. But I would say by probably the winter of last year, we started to see pickup. First, and you mentioned domestic violence. We've seen more domestic violence matters from people who have just been in their homes all day, all the time. It's interesting, a colleague of mine, and this was early on, said, till death do us part wasn't supposed to mean 24/7, 365.
Right.
Nobody ever anticipated that was going to be something that you would do where you were with your family members all the time,
including your children.
Was no, including your children, there was no escape. My husband was working from home. I was working from home. My kids were doing school from home. We live in a 15 to 1,600 square foot ranch. It would be like, oh, you have a case management call with Judge so-and-so. I'd like track out to the garage and, kind of hide in a corner so it didn't look like I was in the garage.
Right.
But, those things really did lead to a lot of breakdown of, family units. So we saw the uptick in the domestic violence calls. Now we're seeing, the uptick in the divorce where people, maybe realize that they're on a little bit sound footing, that they're not going to lose their jobs, and just don't want to be married anymore. So,
right. So with that, in conjunction with the real estate market and the lack of inventory to purchase and rent, how does somebody get out of their house?
It's difficult. And it's difficult even if it's not get out, but what to do once the divorce is finalized.
Right.
I mean, if the couple owns a home, then that's generally one of the largest assets that is up for equitable distribution. And it's fine if there's enough equity in the home, which the real estate market is helping right now because a lot of homes have equity. But, once you split that equity, unless it's $1 million home with no mortgage on it, you're not leaving either party with a lot of funds to go purchase something or even find a rental, whether they could afford it or not. And, where do they go? What do they do? How long do you wait to sell the house? Everybody, and it's the same thing, even with the people that aren't getting divorced, everybody wants to take advantage of the hot market.
Sure.
But then if you don't have a place to go and kind of wait till it cools off, then, the hot market can be great, but it can also be difficult.
So in a divorce situation, can a single party force the sale of the home? Primary home, marital home, whatever you call it? It's
not a matter of a single party doing it. It's basically that's what will be done unless there is an agreement to the contrary. So if there's someone that wants to stay in the home, and has a way to purchase the other person's equity out from them, whether it be by funds, refinance of a mortgage, things like that, or whether it be by exchange of other assets. So, quite often if you have retirement assets, other cash assets, liquid assets, whatever it might be, you can say, okay, let's use easy numbers. There's $100,000 equity in the home. That would be $50,000 to each party, assuming there are no extraneous circumstances. But wife wants to stay in the home. She doesn't have an extra $50,000, but husband has $400,000 in his 401k, of which $200,000 should go to the wife. So instead, wife will take, and I'm going to simplify this, $150,000.
we like simple.
Well, because just like everything else in the law, it's not exactly those numbers, because 401k would be tax money and you have to tax affect it. So, but the idea is that there would be a trade-off of some funds out of the 401k towards the purchase of the home. And then, then wife can stay there. But of course, then wife has to make sure she can afford to stay there with whatever, mortgage payments or tax payments or anything like that go.
Right. So what if one of the parties in the relationship is a non-working party, right? And then there's a divorce that happens. The working party has to then continue to pay for everything as was per prior for a period of time. What if that working party doesn't want to maintain the home and they want to downgrade because they need to go from one home to two homes? Is that something that the court will then?
Correct. If the parties don't both agree, and this is basically on any aspect of the divorce case, if the parties don't agree, then it's going to go to a court to decide. And the court's default is sell whatever you have and split it both, split it equally.
Right.
So, that segues a little bit into why mediation and settling out of court is so helpful, because, a judge isn't going to sit there and say, well, I'm going to do the analysis of, what it would take for a trade-off of this equity, or, how much it's going to need, how much the wife's going to need to continue to upkeep the home, or how much the husband can afford in the event, he has to pay this much towards spousal support. And that, of course, can be switched gender roles as
Sure.
well. We have plenty of wives making more money than husbands, and then it would be the wife paying the support. Or obviously, we also have single sex marriages. So whatever the higher wage earner, they have to also be able to survive after they're paying spousal support, and if they've been left with less money out of an asset. As a result of a trade-off, because trade-off of retirement funds are great, except that no one can touch them without the tax implications.
Right.
So, it's like, okay, that's great. I got more in my retirement, but I can't do anything with it unless I want to be penalized for it.
So tell me more about mediation, right? So you are, are you a certified mediator? Or are you just a mediator? Court-approved mediator. Okay.
The legal profession is very, very funny about anybody being able to call themselves certified.
Okay.
They only allow certified civil trial attorneys, certified criminal trial attorneys, and certified matrimonial attorneys. I believe in workers' compensation. But what being a court-approved mediator means is that I went through a program that was presented by the New Jersey Institute for Continuing Legal Education, which is part of the state bar, which I believe was 48 hours of training back in, it's more than 10 years ago. So I would say, or approximately 10 years ago, I did that program. And what that allows me to do is be on a roster of people in the courthouse that if a case gets so far in the process and hasn't settled yet, there is a mandatory mediation where the parties get 2 free hours, and you go to one of the approved mediators and try to resolve it that way. Obviously, the court favors settlement to trials, just because of the sheer numbers. We only have, at a good day, maybe 8 family law judges. And you have to remember that family law includes...
And that's Monmouth County.
That's Monmouth County, yeah. Family law includes divorce, domestic violence, children in court, which is the Division of Child Protection and Permanency, or Placement and Permanency. It used to be known as DIFAS. Juvenile matters are heard in the family court. We have post-judgment motions, which are people who are coming back after their divorce to say my alimony should be lowered because I've lost my job because of COVID, for example. And we have what we call the non-dissolution docket, which is matters that involve family members who haven't been married. So that can either be a couple who didn't marry but have children together, or sometimes you have parent and child regarding custody of a grandchild, and people like that. So we have, 8 different types of matters that these 8 judges have to hear. It's not like they're all just sitting there ready to hear divorce cases. And some of the other ones are generally considered to be more emergent, certainly, than the divorce. So, you could be out there for what's scheduled to be your divorce case, and there's a domestic violence case or a division case where, a child's being removed from a home because of neglect or abuse, and you're getting bounced right back, to the back of the line.
So in domestic violence and juvenile cases, those are usually obviously things that involve the police at some point, right? It escalates to that level. They can. Is there a level before that, where there's a way for someone to reach out for help?
Sure. Well, a victim in a domestic violence matter doesn't have to call the police. They can now, again, it used to be go to the courthouse, but now I believe there is either a phone call to make or an email to contact a person to have a judge review what they're alleging and just issue a temporary restraining order. I would imagine, and I don't know the statistics on that though, that right now we're having more domestic violence matters come through police contact. And something doesn't necessarily have to rise to a crime to be considered domestic violence. There's 2 standards. Sometimes you'll get both. So the person will be charged, obviously, in a case of an assault. The person might be charged in the criminal courts as well as have a temporary restraining order issued against them. And then the restraining order hearing is they try to have those done in less than a certain number of days. It's somewhere around 30 by mandate of the state, because a lot of times you're putting somebody out of their home. They don't want that to drag on.
Right.
So,
so are you in a position, if there is a domestic violence situation going on, where one party could reach out to you before going to the court and discuss it with you, or should they go to the court, call the police, obviously, if it's dangerous at that point, right? What kind of advice, can you share to somebody that may be listening to this and may be feeling that they're part of an abusive, a violent situation and want to start seeking a way out?
So my first advice would always be, if you're in any type of danger, call the police. Right. Go to the police, get out, go somewhere. People get wrapped up in things like, well, I might be considered abandoning, and that's not the case in the least. Nobody's ever going to think you abandoned anyone if you got out because of your own safety. And then, that aside, if you're not sure, there are places, there are resources. We have 180 in Monmouth County. It's 180 Turning Lives Around. They're based in either Hazlitt or Holmdel. I know where they are. I'm just not sure right there. Right. It's kind of a borderline as to what it's considered. They also have staff in the courthouse when there is court. I'm sure there are some other women's shelters, that would work with people and children. And, definitely, make yourself safe before worrying about the legal aspect of it. And then from there, then people can reach out to me and say, I filed for a TRO. I'm nervous. I don't want to go to court on my own. I don't, my spouse or my partner hired an attorney, and I don't know how to do this because it's not a criminal matter. So there's no prosecutor that's going to prosecute the matter. The plaintiff in the restraining order complaint is the one that has to provide the evidence to prove that there was a domestic violence act and that they should deserve a final restraining order as a result. So, that's where people will come to me, or people will come to me on the other side. My spouse filed for a TRO, my ex-spouse filed for a TRO. I think it's crazy, nothing happened, or these are the facts. And I go, okay, you may have an issue here. So, that would be where the legal process starts. Okay. You usually get a return date on a final restraining order hearing very quickly. Generally, the judges will give everybody a chance to get counsel if they want to, because it's so fast. And then they do try to get them either, resolved or go to trial within, that short period of time. Right. Circumstances that exist that, require more time, they do put the case on what they call indefinite status. Right. And those are few and far between, though. A lot of times it has to do with whether or not the person who's been accused of the Domestic Violence Act might have issues with their licensing or their jobs or things like that, if they're found to have committed that domestic violence act. And there's no true settling of a domestic violence matter. Right. If the parties are married and are filing for divorce, then there are ways you can say, okay, we'll dismiss the restraining order, but we'll handle it as a civil order in the divorce case. But those don't have the same force and effect of a restraining order. It's not a crime if that's violated, where it is a crime if a restraining order is violated. Right. So I think this is great information. I think it's good to put it out there for anybody that's, questioning their domestic situation. So we kind of teetered off of a little bit of the divorce, put a little bit of extra information out there. But going back into the divorce, hiring 2 lawyers versus hiring one mediator sounds much more cost effective from my perspective. The way I look at it, I'm like, hey, can we find a way to save 10 grand here and keep an extra 5 apiece? Even if there are 2 lawyers involved, it's still more cost effective to have a mediator mediate the case than go to trial. Right. Because of reasons like I just explained, where, so family law in New Jersey, anyway, is not a jury trial. It's a bench trial, which means the judge is going to hear the evidence and make the decisions. So you don't get a straight 5 days of trial. You say, okay, my trial's going to be 5 days long. You don't get a week where they're going to try your case like you do in criminal and civil court. Right. You get, okay, the judge can fit you in on this day, but then they have to hear warrants on, child support judgments this day, and then they have a DV calendar that day, and then you come back in 2 weeks and you do your next day. And then you get out there on what is supposed to be your first day, and there's been some god awful incident where, the division is involved and the judge has to get called to conference the case and your divorce day is gone. Now your attorney's prepared.
Right.
They've gone to court. Again, if we're post-COVID back in court, they've gone to court, they've spent the time there. And then, you're doing it all again a week from then and nothing's happened. So you could literally have 5 to 8 hours worth of billing for absolutely nothing to have happened. Whereas when you mediate, it's like, okay, the mediator has this day available, my attorney's available, their attorney's available, everybody comes, sit in the office for 4 hours. And even if we don't resolve it that day, we've done 4 hours worth of work towards resolving it. So
totally makes sense. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming out today. We didn't even dive into the insurance aspect of things, but I think that's okay. I think everybody listening gets it. If there is a divorce situation, you need to separate your insurance also, both home, auto, and then also make sure that there's life insurance in place on both sides. Should there be any payment requirements, children involved, life insurance is always important. We were sitting out in the hallway before getting into the studio and I got a text through my website about gap insurance for their home. And I said, well, that's life insurance is your gap insurance for your home to make sure that your kids can keep it should something happen to you. And the same thing happens in a divorce case. Make sure your life insurance is paid up. And then
tuition,
separate assets, vehicles, buy new homes, whatever it's going to be. And then obviously everybody's going to have to be on their own with respect to insurance. But one party often doesn't understand the insurance because they didn't go through the buying process of the insurance product. So reaching out to a professional insurance agent, a good independent agent, is going to be super helpful. Someone that can walk you through the buying process to make sure you have adequate coverage to protect yourself and the rest of your family, as it may be. So Julia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate your time and we'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Aaron.